Good evening, everybody. My name is Charity Rouse. I am the Director of Local History for the Spartanburg County Public Library System in Spartanburg, South Carolina. It is our delight to bring this genealogy series to you on the first Monday of each month, October through June. So we will take a break here for July, August, and September, and we'll start again in October. Do check the library's event calendar for those classes to register for the Zoom. You may also find this on the library's YouTube page a day or two after the live presentation. In library's YouTube page, genealogy playlist, you can see a vast majority of the genealogy programs that we have presented, primarily myself, but there are other presenters from the library as well, since 2020. So, you know, you can see a lot of different things. Sometimes I have updated a program every couple of years, so you'll see some repeats in there. But tonight we're going to be talking about using social history to fill in the gaps. And this is one of the things that we get people who ask, when you watch the genealogy programs on TV, they pull out the book of life. They have these pictures, they have these stories, they tell the context of what's happening around the person when they're immigrating or moving or all of that kind of thing. Well, where do they find that information? So this is a first step into helping find that information. There is a handout for this program. It can be found in the link in the live Zoom class, or you may email our library. You can go to the contact us at the library's main website page, choose local history, ask for the handout there, or there will be an email address at the end that you can email. So, some things that we'll look at tonight. Little bit of an overview about what is social history, two case studies, one on prohibition and one on immigration, some resource lists that are also in the handout, but I did put them in on slides for a number of topics, and then we'll take questions in the chat. The stack of books on the right of your screen are just a few of the books that I pulled off the shelves of the Kennedy Room that would be considered social history. And we're not going to talk about all of them tonight. We do not have that much time, but they're all on the handout plus more. So you can find books on a lot of topics, and we'll talk about how you find those in a little bit. So, what exactly is social history? Well, social history is the term used to denote the study of ordinary people, their everyday lives, and the practices and rituals that can constitute these. That's from ScienceDirect.com. Merriam-Webster says, social history concentrates upon the social, economic, and cultural institutions of a people or the environmental history of an individual. So it gives us a chance to see a lot of the context, what's happening around your people. As genealogists, we sometimes get so focused on name, date, location, name, date, location, name, date, location, date of marriage, date of birth, that we don't always look at the why. Why did they move where they moved? That kind of thing. So, we're going to talk a little bit about sometimes when you want to use social history resources. So, a big question we get is why did someone move? Was it a war or genocide or conflict? One of our colleagues has an Armenian ancestor who moved because of the Armenian genocide. Was there famine or crop failure? The one that everybody thinks about is the Irish potato famine. But there were bad harvests and bad years in lots of different areas. here in South Carolina, we raised cotton for a good chunk of 2 centuries. And cotton is really, really, really hard on the land. And so a lot of folks from South Carolina ended up in Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, into Louisiana as those territories opened up to settlement because there was fresh land there that had not been depleted. You may find that there was an economic depression. Again, the big one everyone thinks about is the 1930s with the Great Depression, but there were depressions at other times, including the 1890s and plenty of times before that. You may find people moving for job opportunities. My grandfather, his older brother, and their mother moved from PD, Latta, South Carolina, up to Norfolk, Virginia in the late 1920s because there were more jobs there for my great uncle. He was an auto mechanic. Maybe you find that their house burned or a family member died. And so not everyone could continue living on that property. You may find that you're looking at someone and they were involved in a court case. So we're going to look at that in our first case study. You're going to want to look at what the local, state, and national laws had to say about why that person was in court. You're also going to want to look at local, national, and global movements which changed laws, abolition, freeing slaves, temperance and prohibition against alcohol, um, when people could vote or not vote. Those were larger laws and movements that may have affected your ancestors and the time and place that they lived. You may want to research the background of a social movement or group, things such as prohibition, the experience of women, the African American experience, religious groups and why they moved, and educational movements. Who could be educated? Was it free? Was it a paid education? What were the expectations of numbers of hours for students to study? So there are all sorts of reasons to use social history resources, and we don't always take the time to do that. So let's look at this case study under prohibition. The picture here is of the biggest bust in Spartanburg's history in May of 1930. This is at the courthouse steps, then courthouse steps. And you see some of the things that were found at this house. Well, what was prohibition? I mean, we gotta start with knowing what it is we're looking at. And this was a movement in some other countries as well, but in the United States, the 18th Amendment to the Constitution banned the production, sale, or transportation of alcoholic beverages from 1920 to 1933. Why? Why ban this? Well, beginning in colonial America, there was widespread drinking of alcoholic beverages, even in the more heavily religious areas of the country. From colonial times, really in the period just before and after the Revolution, temperance groups started advocating for less drinking. One of the things they knew was that people who drank a lot tended to be abusive and their families tended to need public assistance. And so this was hopeful that they could reduce the amount of alcohol and increase the amount of family support that was happening and help women not be abused, help children not be abused, etc. So these temperance campaigns began in the 1700s, largely, to limit access to addictive substances widespread, alcohol in particular, which were seen as causes for public health, family problems, and other societal issues of the day. Drunken brawls were a problem. Even in Puritan New England, drunk young men going out and firing shotguns into the sky killed a number of people because the bullets would go up and come back down and hit somebody. So, things like that, there were some problems. There were also unforeseen consequences, such as the rise of organized crime and widespread corruption, bribes, election fraud, etc., because people wanted to get alcohol-friendly people into their legislature so that they would forgive their fines for running liquor. I mean, other things that came out of it, NASCAR. So, racing moonshine to escape the revenuers. So is not everything out of temperance was bad and prohibition, but it was a rough 13 years here in the U.S. On both sides of the issue. So, who was involved in the bust? Well, front page of the paper, Spartanburg Journal and Carolina Spartan, May 6th, 1930. This was our afternoon paper, so this happened that morning. It was in the paper that afternoon. And so you may find your relative and find that they were involved in something big. In this case, the Jenkins family, the maid, or even the officers involved in the bust. Newspapers are a great resource for social history. So, this was the largest bust of alcohol making equipment and alcohol at that time in Spartanburg. These were some of the men involved with the bust, as well as a huge copper still, 210 gallons of whiskey, and 450 gallons of beer were taken in the raid. And that is from the Spartanburg Herald on the morning of May 8th. That was our morning paper. So remember, check all papers, even if they are at the same time. They may carry different stories. Somebody may have a scoop that the other paper didn't have, that kind of thing. Well, this got me interested in, well, who were the Jenkins family? A little research about them. I did find them in the 1920 federal census. They lived near Gaffney, South Carolina, which used to be in Spartanburg, but by then was in Cherokee County. And May 10th of 1920, a J.F. Jenkins and J.F. Jenkins Jr. have chartered the Spartan Blood Wine Bottling Company. As far as I could tell, the Blood Wine Bottling Company was some sort of a health tonic company, and they originated out of Atlanta. So this was a local franchise of this blood wine bottling company. It didn't seem to do a lot, and they were getting sued for something in about somewhere later in the 1920s, but the county court couldn't handle it because they were still living up in Gaffney. They were living out of county. So you never know. But this says they had experience with bottling things, so they knew how to bottle liquids. The 1930 Hills City Directory said that they were at 364 Marion Avenue, and this is also where we find Mrs. Jenkins' first name of Avalona, and that JF is James F., and the daughter's name is Lucille, although we did know Lucille from the original articles. In the 1930 federal census, they were enumerated at 634 Marion Avenue as renters for $50 a month. They did own a radio set. The parents are both 59 years of age. James Jr. is 28, Lucille is 26. And James Jr. is listed as a salesman for a novelties company. Others were listed as home. So James Jr. was the one earning the money for the family. And you will see with the yellow arrows on the right where James F. And Avalona, as well as James F. Jr., are listed in the top area, and Lucille is listed further down the list. Remember, in the city directories, look them up by their last name and then check for everyone at the same address within that name. Um, and then in May 10th of 1920, oh, I have that twice. Did I proof my stuff before going to NGS conference? Sorry about that. So, what happened to them after the bust? Well, in May 7th article, um, J.F. Jenkins Jr. and Sr. were given a sentence of $200 fine or 60 days each, but were released on bond on the 7th. Lucille Jenkins was also charged with the same offense, but was released on the 6th. Ida Mae Wood, the Negro cook, was also arrested but failed to make bond, so was still confined in jail on the 7th. One article said that Avalona Jenkins was in jail. None of this seems to bear that out. And unfortunately, while we do have some of the early jail books, we do not have jail books for this time period. But that would be another source to look at. On October 26th of 1930, there was a list of prisoners sent to chain gangs, which was published in the Herald. J.F. Jenkins Jr. was sentenced to 4 years on the chain gang. Apparently, he skipped bail or skipped his bond, and they may have gone to Charlotte. And he was hauled back. His offense was gaining some ground. Um, on November 10th, uh, J.F. Jenkins Jr. was transferred from the chain gang to the state pardon board seeking clemency. So he was seeking a pardon just, 15 days later after he was sent to the chain gang. November 18th, 1930, he was stated as assuming responsibility for the bottling plant, for the still and everything, and the charges against all of the others were dropped. He was serving a year sentence. April 31st of 1931, so he's been in jail for a minute. J.F. Jenkins Jr. was granted clemency by Governor Blackwood, and the sentence was suspended because of physical condition. So we know that J.F. Jenkins Jr. might not have been in great shape to be on the chain gang. His father definitely was not in good shape. And Governor Blackwood at that time had granted clemency to a record number of people who were on various charges, but a lot of them prohibition temperance charges. So I don't know. I didn't look at and see what Governor Blackwood's election was based on, and whether he was alcohol friendly or not, but could have played a role in that. So by January 2nd of 1933, in North Carolina, in Charlotte, James F. Jenkins Sr. dies. So he was in poor health in 1930. which is why James Jr. was the one uh, bringing in any money into the household. February 16th, 1942, we do have James Jenkins Jr. on a draft card at age 42, still self-employed as a novelty salesman. December 25th, 1959, from Find a Grave, we have James Jenkins dying in Charlotte at age 60. He was married and had no children per the obituary. July 21, 1960, you find a North Carolina death certificate as well as an obituary for Avalona Jenkins dying in Charlotte. She never remarried, and Lucille has married by that time. So, finding resources for this case study, you're going to look for newspapers. You're going to look at the census. You're going to look at various things. Search the names associated with the case or the names of your family members. Don't just search the local paper. If you have access to other papers, you may find additional reporting. Especially, we have some time periods in the late 1800s, early 1900s, where our paper does not survive. Our papers, both of them were printed at the same printing press building, and there was a fire. And they just don't survive. But other papers in the region um, printed articles from the Herald and the Journal and the Carolina Spartan at whatever time period. And sometimes you find at least parts of articles, if not the whole article. The Charleston paper has covered statewide much of our history. The state newspaper out of Columbia covers South Carolina statewide, um, especially the more interesting articles. But you will also find obituaries that have been specialed to those papers. So do take a look. Sometimes things make absolute national news. I have family in Virginia that was part of a courthouse shooting in Carroll County, Virginia, in the late winter, early spring of 1912. And that made front page news even in Topeka, Kansas, where I was living when my mom was telling me about it. And I'm like, no, it didn't make national. Oh, there it is on the Topeka Daily Capital. So you never know what's going to get carried by other newspapers. Various newspaper databases are held by libraries. If you have Ancestry, you can get newspapers.com there. We have Newsbank newspapers. Um, there are quite a few other places that cover newspapers. Chronicling America is another one through the Library of Congress, especially if you're looking at earlier papers, early part of the 20th century and before. So those are just some places to find newspapers. This is a screenshot of our library catalog when I put in a keyword search for prohibition. It was 232, I think, results, and another 115 could be with related keywords. So you're going to find a lot of things. Now, you will see, though, that some of this is mysteries, fiction about um, prohibition, mysteries, movies, that kind of thing. You want to see on the left-hand column the various subject headings and things that can help you limit. Oh, I don't want an audiobook. Or, oh, let me look at the ones with organized crime or murder or gangsters. Um, you may find locations, New York, New York, true crime stories, criminals, mafia, thrillers. Well, those are going to be fiction, but a lot of them can be based on real stories, so you never know. Um, and Another thing you can do is look at what the Dewey Decimal Number, or if you are in a library that uses Library of Congress, what the Library of Congress call number is for books in the topic that you're looking for. Dewey, the way where we put it in our Dewey Decimal System, is 363.41 or similar numbers. Um, we do not have the wider histories of prohibition in our Kennedy Room collection because we just collect Spartanburg County and South Carolina adjacent regions. So ours are regionally focused, but we do have a number of resources on prohibition in the upstate of South Carolina, Dark Corner, and things like that. But you may find things not just in the local history section, but in the greater collections. So, subject headings are your friend. Don't just let that be your school research papers. Use them about your family history as well when you find that they were in the path of something interesting. Um, Another big question that we get in the Kennedy Room is, well, why did they move? When they immigrated, why did they move? Well, where were they? Where did they start? And where did they end up? What was the time period? The century or decade matters. Irish immigration was happening before and after the Irish potato famine, but it's for a different reason. Somewhat, religious unrest and things like that. But there, again, were smaller crop failures and things, but the Irish potato famine really affected a lot, millions of people. The map in this on this page is courtesy of the Ron Swain Map Collection, which is one of our digital collections in our um, library historical digital collections online. Um, fabulous, fabulous collection of early Southeast United States maps, not just North and South Carolina like this. They're on our website. A good selection of them are on our website under our historical digital collections. And I don't think I put that in the handout. Sorry. So, when you're looking at immigration, and honestly, when you're looking at your ancestors generally, you need to remember your W's. Who are you looking for? Be specific. What were they doing? What was their occupation? What was their religion? Were they escaping war? Etc. When did they live? Again, time period is super important. Where did they start and end their journey? Did they pause in the middle? Did they stop somewhere for a couple of years on their way west and just decide, nope, this isn't for me, it's getting too crowded, I'm moving on west? And then why did they leave? Was it because they were a younger child and did not inherit land? Is it because they had a fight with their family? Is it because there just wasn't enough land to go around with 15 kids in the family? Who knows? Did they just have the impulse to explore and move new places? There are some people and some families who kept moving and moving and moving, even when it was difficult to move. There are other people who, you know, never left England, never left Virginia. My grandmother's family, by and large, on my dad's side, got to the eastern shore of Virginia, all two counties of it on the eastern side of the Chesapeake Bay, and didn't move west. They got there in the 1600s and they didn't move west until the 20th century. The 1920s, late 19 teens, between the world wars, they moved as far west as Norfolk, Virginia. My father was the rebel. He went to college in Blacksburg, Virginia, at Virginia Tech in Shenandoah Valley, southern end of the valley. and met my mother, and he stayed in the Shenandoah Valley, and that was just unheard of because there was no ocean any or bay anywhere near. We have rivers, but we also have mountains. Um, one of my great aunts came to visit, sorry, great great aunts came to visit when her granddaughter was graduating from uh, James Madison University. And Aunt Nanny sat perched on the edge of the sofa, white knuckling her handbag for the duration of the visit, hour, 2 hours, whatever it was, because she was certain that the house was going to slide down that hill. We lived on a hill called Upland Drive, which was a pretty steep hill, only a block long, but the steep part, only a block long. But she was terrified that we were going to slide down the hill. So you never know why people stay or move or decide it's not for them. So let's look at our second case study. Why did people leave England for what became America? Well, between 1540 and 1600, the population of England and Wales increased by almost 45%, causing inflation, shortages, and London's population doubled in the 16th century and again by the mid 17th century. So there was population growth just running rampant, and it was just too crowded. The Virginia Company, also known as the London Company, was chartered in 1606 to colonize the eastern coast of America. That company failed in 1624, and the area became a royal colony of Great Britain. Jamestown was settled by members of the Virginia Company in 1607. The investors wanted to see a profit from gold and silver, which was not found. The first settlers were all men, although two women arrived in 1608. This was not sustainable for population growth. Um, and they did have more women come, but it was rough. One of those women in 1608 dies before 1612. The other one was her maidservant, and the maidservant marries in I think it was 1612. And so she would not have married had her mistress still needed her. Um, Jamestown in 1610 had 85% of the population, not a huge population, but 85% of them died during the starving time. So being in the colony of Virginia in those early days was incredibly hard work, and it was dangerous. So, what induced my ancestors to go? Well, one set of the ancestors, I'm still working on double proving all of the line, but one set of my purported ancestors is Nathaniel Bass and Mary Jordan. He was born in England, December 19th, 1589, died in 1652. We think in Virginia, but he could have been in England again. Sources vary. I haven't had time to dig through all of them. They're incredibly difficult to read. They were married, according to one document, on the 21st of March in 1613. They had at least 8 children, some say 10. And at least one son may have been killed in the March 1622 Indian attacks. There was a very large Indian attack, March 1622, that was coordinated across most of the settled plantations. Two sons, at least according to some sources, Edward and John, both married Indian women. I can find proof of one and a lot of family stories for the other one. Um, and then we do know that Nathaniel Bass brought goods from England to Virginia for the Virginia Company. His father, Humphrey Bass, was an investor in the company. So this may be why he came, because his father was um, an investor in the company and didn't want to move. He was older at that point, so why not send your sons? And a couple sons might have uh, been in the colonies at various times. And this is Boyd's Inhabitants of London. I believe it's the 1602 update. And I did this screen capture from Find My Past. You will notice on the bottom left of this page, on the back of the page before, there is a note. I will show you that note momentarily. So, in the children, the list of children of Humphrey and another Mary Bass, keeping the Mary straight is a royal pain, just saying. You will see there was a son Humphrey, born in 1588, a son Nathaniel, born in 1589, December 19th, uh, and St. Gabriel's church or area. You see Nathaniel is marrying Mary Jordan, 21 March, oh, 21 May, sorry, of 1613, and that he died in 1652, 1654, depending on which thing you look at. So, the note in the left-hand page on the back of the previous thing, always check the previous and the back of your own pages. Nathaniel, son of Humphrey Bass, went to Virginia, where some of his children settled, but it is believed he returned to England. So, we don't know. There are questions yet to be answered. So, some resources that I checked and continue to research and will continue to research include the Muster of Virginia in 1624, when it was becoming changing over from Virginia Company as a private entity back to the Crown to become a royal colony. They took a census. They took a muster. They took a census. So on the left-hand page here, you will see a muster of the neighboring plantation of Edward Bennett, who may also be an ancestor, still working out through the Bennetts. There are a lot of them too. And then a muster of the inhabitants of Bass's Choice. You will notice Choice is spelled Choyse there. So remember, spelling is a 20th century invention, or at least standardized spelling is. It's no longer standardized these days, but, you know, use fuzzy searching. But you see Captain Nathaniel Bass, and Captain was most likely he was a sea captain. Still working my way through that. And his muster was Nathaniel Bass, age 35. He came in the furtherance in 1622. But we know that the plantation was there before that, so it may have been that was his most recent trip back to the colony. William Barnard, age 21, also in the furtherance, and Edmund Wiggy, age 22, in the Abigail in 1621. And then you also get the provisions that they had. They had 40 bushels of corn, 6 bushels of peas, etc., etc., etc. So you can find out some very interesting information. On the right-hand page, or right-hand of the screen, on 16th of February, there's a list of the names of the living in Virginia and those who have died since April 1623. So they were trying to keep at least a head count. There were a lot of diseases that took people out, a lot of accidents. Many of the women who went did die with their clothing catching on fire while they were cooking, things like that. Childbirth was really rough. They were coming from a place like London that had corner stores and markets to a colony that had nothing that they did not build or bring with them. So, in this list, we find at Bass's Choice living Captain Nathaniel Bass, Samuel Bass, Benjamin Symes, Thomas Sherwood, Benjamin Hanclair, William Barnard, John Shelley, Nathaniel Moper, Nathaniel Gannon, Margaret Giles, Richard Long, Long's wife, Infant Long. Kind of mad they didn't name the wife or the infant. Um, Richard Evans, William Newman, John Army, Peter Langdon, Henry, can't read the last name, Andrew Raleigh, and Peter, can't read the last name. So these are from two of the books that talk about Virginia immigrants. Sometimes they aren't quite as lists of names as you think, but sometimes they are, and you have to use multiple resources to prove that this is the right person with the right name. So, this past week at the National Genealogical Society Conference, I had a chance to go to Allen County Public Library's Genealogy Center, and this is one of the books I looked at. And it is Virginia Company of London. These are some letters and that were never before printed, or at least never before 1869. They also had the full record, or they had some printed records of the Virginia Company, and I ran out of time. I They've got to be digitized somewhere. They've been published long enough. But in this, there is a list of things, and Nathaniel Bass ended up in the House of Burgesses in Virginia. And so that's another set of records to look at that I have not yet looked at. But always check the footnotes because that's where the good stuff has been about Bass and Bass's Choice. In the main part of the page, Bass is in a list of people who are um, petitioning to take over ownership, kind of as a group, of a Lawns plantation, Lawns Creek in Isle of Wight County, and preserving the name of that first planter, who was presumably a friend. He was a neighbor. And it says Bass had a plantation known as Bass's Choice. In 1630, he was a member of the Council of Virginia, and in March 1631, too, remember, we're still pre-Gregorian calendar, we're still on the Julian calendar, where the first of the year was the spring equinox. So that 1631/32 means it's that later spring. So we're really in what we would now consider 1632. He was authorized to go to New England and offer the inhabitants a settlement on Delaware Bay. So he was authorized by the other Burgesses to, on a trip up to Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630, to invite people down to settle between Jamestown and Massachusetts Colony. Um, I haven't yet found how successful that was. So, and so they were, you find records about neighbors and look at your own people in those records. This is from Virginia Immigrants and Adventurers, 1607 to 1635. when you get biographical histories like this, do check their sources and do check behind them for more modern resources. Um, Nathaniel Bass has a section, as does his wife Mary Jordan and numerous of their children. So, this is one of the sources that claims two of the sons married Native women. So, I don't disbelieve, but I want to see a little bit more evidence than some other researcher claims this. I want to see the actual source. Now, they're stating a family Bible. I would love to see a digitized version of that family Bible. Thank you very much. Um, and Bass's choice does have a historical marker. Um, And so it states in November 1621, Captain Nathaniel Bass received a grant of 300 acres of land, now known as Bass's Choice, located nearby. It was one of the first English settlements in Isle of Wight County, although humans had lived there more than 5,000 years. On March 16th, 1622, during the Powhatan English War of 1622 to 1632, attacks coordinated by Chief Opera Canal, and I'm sure I just mispronounced that, sorry about that, struck various English settlements, including Bass's Choice. Bass was in England when this event occurred. He resettled the region by 1624 when 20 people lived there. Bass later served in the House of Burgesses and was appointed to the Governor's Council in March of 1630. Um, According to various sources, at least one, if not multiple, of his sons perished in that Indian raid attack. So, but you may find historical markers. So, it's one of those situations where, social history is looking at those resources outside of your standard genealogy lists of names, dates, and locations. So I'm going to talk through um, some different types of resources for different types of research. And I'll start with prohibition. Some of these I've talked about earlier, some of them I haven't. And these are not exhaustive lists, these are just examples. But Prohibition, a concise history, is was helpful with background of prohibition. The Catherine Smith books, Baptists and Bootleggers, a Prohibition Expedition Through the South, with cocktail recipes. And her follow up book, Methodists and Moonshiners, another Prohibition Expedition Through the South with cocktail recipes, are hysterically funny. They are well researched, but they are entertaining and talk about what was going on, what were regionally popular cocktail recipes or drinks for each of the places that she talks about in these books. And then there's Bruce Stewart's Moonshiners and Prohibitionists, The Battle Over Alcohol in Southern Appalachia. Now, you will notice some of these, two of these, are from university presses, Oxford and Kentucky. You're going to want to look at the catalogs of university presses. This is where the scholars who are working in American history and social history, economic history, and history of uh, lots of different types of things are going to largely be published. And so don't just think they're academic. Some of them are very academic. Some of them are very well written and fairly easy to read. And some of them may feature your ancestor as an example. Um, I'll talk about one of those in a minute. I apologize. I should have split this list onto two slides. But immigration and community history, those can be very helpful. Um, On this list, I belong to South Carolina, South Carolina slave narratives. There are a number of different versions of slave narratives and people who have put context around the slave narratives that were done by the WPA in the 1930s. That is the largest collection of slave narratives, but not the only collection. Um, when I was talking about the immigrants to Virginia in the 1600s, I did look at Peter Coldham's The Complete Book of Immigrants, 1607 to 1660. There are four or five more in that set of books for different time periods. Uh, and John Frederick Dorman's Adventures of Person, Virginia, 1607 to 1624/5, fourth edition. Uh, One of the more classic social histories is Albion Seed, Four British Folkways in America, by David Hacker Fisher. It takes four different subgroups of uh, British Isles immigrants and traces them in the United States, including an Appalachian section, and their naming conventions that are talked about in various things. So it's a really solid. It's a doorstop, but it's really solid. Um, James Leyburn's The Scotch Irish, A Social History, was one of the very early social histories. The social histories became a more specific and defined discipline in the 1960s and 70s, more similar to the social history books that are being published today. There were some earlier social histories, think county histories around the turn of the 1900s, give or take a couple decades either way. You do have to watch with the ones that are less scholarly, that their sources may just be family story. And you're gonna have to, with any of these, if your people are mentioned, make sure that you have multiple sources and not just. Um, the history of Marion County, South Carolina, uh, has a completely wrong origin story for my Allen family. And if I believed that, I'd still be not having any of the resources or no dad's name. Um, so check, read it, make sure that you're checking the breadcrumb trail of their footnotes, their end notes to see what their sources are on their claims. Um, Martha McCartney, Virginia Immigrants and Adventurers, 1607 to 1635, a biographical dictionary. Um, J. Britt Morris, Yes, Lord, I Know the Road, a documentary history of African Americans in South Carolina, 1526 to 2008. Um, Julia Cherry Sproul, Women's Life and Work in the Southern Colonies. Originally published in 1938, so that's one of those very early period. It's been republished, and so it's worth taking a look at. Um, Amrita Meyer's Forging Freedom, Black Women in the Pursuit of Liberty in Antebellum Charleston. Jennifer Potter, The Jamestown Brides, the story of England's maids for Virginia. And that talks about the Virginia Company um, in the 1621, 20 and 21 period, did some speculation and recruited women to migrate to the colony to become wives of all of these men who had settled. And not altogether successful, but not altogether unsuccessful. But a lot of the women ended up dying because there's no trace of them in the records. But some of them did end up surviving and becoming very strong leaders in the community. Helen Roundtree, Pocahontas's People, the Powhatan Indians of Virginia through 4 centuries. This is one of the sources that talks about one of the Bass sons who married a native cousin of Pocahontas. Um, if I remember correctly, she's an anthropologist. So she's looking at it from slightly different angle than your average genealogy book. Melissa Walker, Country Women Cope with Hard Times, a collection of oral histories. And again, oral histories over time can be helpful because they may not talk about your person directly, but they may talk about the neighbors. They may interview someone who was in a similar socioeconomic situation to your ancestor, so you can get an idea about the life that surrounded them, not just um, you know, the names, dates, and locations. And then Mary Weeks Baxter, Leaving the South, Border Crossing Narratives, and the Remaking of Southern Identity. It's looking at the post-Civil War and Reconstruction era, as well as the Great Migration of African Americans in the 1920s, leaving the South, building community elsewhere. So some other resources. Obviously, I only had time for two case studies, but I had gathered information on a number of topics. So, economics, business, and industry. Don't forget to research what your ancestor did. Even just farmers weren't just farmers. But just from some of the shelves in our room, we've got a history of Belk, which was a local department store, a century of retail leadership. The South at Work, observations from 1904. Um, Plantation Goods, a material history of American slavery, with the enslaved who were producing the goods that the plantations were selling. Um, Stephanie Jones Rogers, They Were Her Property, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South. While women couldn't own real property unless they were widowed, real estate, women could own personal property, and enslaved were considered personal property. So don't forget to look at the women in your family if you come from Southern and Northern in the earlier periods, slaveholding families. Um, Entrepreneurs in the Southern Upcountry, Commercial Culture in Spartanburg, South Carolina, 1845 to 1880. And then this is a more local publication. Those are all university presses. But Betsy Wakefield Teeter edited Textile Town, the Spartanburg County, South Carolina. This was the first publication of Hub City Writers Project in 2002 and talks about the textile industry that has been in Spartanburg County since the 1820s. And they have done Hub City Writers Project, Hub City Press now has done a lot of different books about different parts of our community. So look for those locally published books. Um, Social movements, education, and religion. Um, Women were largely involved in these social movements, education and religion. We've got Southern Black women in the modern civil rights movement. We've got Jewish roots in Southern soil, a new history. No Jim Crow Church, the origins of South Carolina's Baha'i community, our second largest, or sorry, one of our larger minority religious groups in South Carolina. Rosenwald Schools of the American South. So that was Reconstruction era, early 20th century schools, primarily for African American students. Angela Elder's Love and Duty, Confederate Women, Widows, and the Emotional Politics of Loss. She looked at a bunch of letters home and to soldiers that survived and correspondence between women talking about their widowhood. And so it was very, very interesting. Um, And then, the additional resources, which are more the things that we as genealogists tend to think about: school yearbooks, city directories, newspapers, county and local histories, genealogy and historical society journals, census records, historical markers, organizational records, like the Virginia Company records that I need to take a deeper look in because Nathaniel Bass and Humphrey Bass were involved in that company. So, I hope you've been putting some questions in the chat. We have time for a few. I see one comment from Betty. In researching newspaper sources, how do you know that you have identified your ancestors and not someone else's? How do you verify your findings? So how I verify my findings is I look at the newspaper source, I look for other records for that location. Like if I have um, Frances Lawhorn came to Buena Vista, Virginia to visit her parents and brought her daughter Mary. Well, can I verify that the parents are living in Buena Vista, Virginia at the time that the visit took place? So the social notices can tell you who moved away, who lives where, who's traveling, who's being visited. So verify that way. If you can find people on censuses, if occupations match, um, if probable ages match. In some places, unfortunately not a lot, in this region of South Carolina, you can find tax records that might be helpful. City directories, again, try to find independent resources, and especially resources that might have been published at the time they were living, not just everything looking back over time. That's kind of how, and you do have to look. I've been banging my head against a supposed loyalist ancestor of mine that was bayoneted in the Rev War in a battle in North Carolina. Of course, the source never says what battle in North Carolina, and they make it sound like there was only one Thomas Blair in North Carolina, or potentially with Cornwallis. I can verify there was a Thomas Blair with Cornwallis in 1781 in April. However, I can also find two Thomas Blairs near Guilford Courthouse uh, around the time of Revolutionary War. My Thomas Blair supposedly escaped to the Virginia mountains and defected from Cornwallis's service. And I'm going to have to do a wider search and make sure I have tracked down all the Thomas Blairs that I can find and either prove that they were still where they were prior to the revolution or during the revolution and after the revolution in one place, and that no one disappeared, or figure out which one disappeared and might have shown up in Virginia after toward the end of the revolution. So, yeah, you have to do a lot of research, potentially other people's ancestors, to make sure that's not your ancestor and make sure you have disproven as many as you can. Hope that helped. Cheryl, do we
Okay,
have other questions?
not a question. I just wanted to comment, and you've gone over this a couple of times in there, but I think it's really important. When I first started genealogy, I was all about birth, marriage, and death, and then moving on to the next relatives or ancestors or whatever. But today, and a lot of genealogists are like this, are starting to put flesh on those bones.
Mm-hmm.
They want to know what they were like. I mean, there are no pictures back in the 1700s, that you can look at. So you depend a lot on social, cultural, political, and economic stories or the context. And that helps you put your person in a place and
Yes.
a time. And so
Mhm.
it makes them more real for you. So I think looking up those things, reading about that time and that area and what was going on there really helps you understand your ancestors. So I just wanted to reiterate what you said about that because I find it fascinating myself.
Yeah, well, and I was looking at some articles about the Blair, well, I was looking for the Blair family and found the same account of him being bayoneted and escaping to North Carolina, or the mountains of the border just above North Carolina in the mountains. And the same thing was quoted in four different genealogy publications by four different descendants. And I'm like, yeah, but I need something more than just one version of the story. I need anything that I can corroborate that my guy actually was the one who served, besides hearsay. And this is based on an interview of someone else who was supposedly in that unit. So I need to go down through the rabbit hole of finding the actual original recording of that, or as original as possible. Theoretically, it's in the North Carolina archives. It's cited wrong in half of the retellings, though. And I've got to track down who this other guy who was remembering about Thomas Blair and see if I can track him from point A to point B to in that same unit with a Thomas Blair and then see what happened to him after. So it's just one of those things where sometimes you have to research the other people around it, around them to find out more information because your ancestors are frustratingly not in the records. So I will never run out of times, and I love the story. I love the story surrounding my people because it makes them more human. Um,
Yeah.
and I I would not have gotten on one of those ships. I have seen the size of those ships. I never know. Uh-uh. So, yeah, if I had been the one that needed to immigrate, I don't think I would have happened. So, but yeah, so I hope you take a look at some of the subjects that surround your ancestors that relate to their lives, the locations where they lived, who their neighbors might have been, their occupations. Um, and this goes for our 20th century ancestors too. It's really hard to think of the 20th century as history, but we are more than a quarter of the way through the 21st century now. So we need to remember to document what we remember and tell those stories so that the generations after us um, have a chance to get to know who we and our more recent ancestors were as well. So,
Okay, Charity, there's one comment and then another
yes,
question. Miss Tolliver wanted to say thank you. So do you see
awesome.
her
Thank
thing there?
you.
She says Spartanburg is her area of research. So hopefully we'll hear
Awesome.
from her. And then
Contact
the
us in
next
the room. Email address is on the screen right now.
one is Angela Smith, and she wants to hear again about the reading challenge.
So, our summer reading challenge, reading is revolutionary. You can read 13 books or read one book for 13 hours or however many books that it takes to read 13 hours. And you fill in the card and with the name of the book and author, and then whether it's the whole book or the hours. And you turn it into us at the library at headquarters. You come to our multimedia fiction desk to turn it in and get your prize, or any of our branches. If you print it out from the website under summer reading, there's a link on our main homepage there at spartanburglibraries.org. You can print out a copy for yourself, and you can also attach it to an email to the Kennedy Room, to the K Room at infodepot.org, or you can mail it into us. Just has to be in by July 31st. And you can get a little, the adult prize is a Bluetooth speaker. There are different prizes for different age groups, and it's all on our website. So, yep, hope
And
you do
then
it. It's
and
great.
and then one last thank you for the
Yep.
lecture from Al Miller. He feels like he can tackle his research now and know what to expect.
Yay! And as always, if you have questions, contact us in the Kennedy Room. There's always somebody at that desk, and we are very happy to help you and at least point you in the right direction for what you need to do next. We can't do your research for you. We can do some lookups if we happen to have the book and we can look up and copy a couple pages for you. But we can't do all of your research for you, but we can certainly help you learn the skills to do the research. Have a
And
great
that seems to
summer.
be it.
Okay, well, have a great summer, everybody. We'll be back in October. And yep, we're getting ready for our in-person Chautauqua performances in the third week in June coming up. Way too fast. So hope to see everybody online or in person sometime soon.
Good
We can
night.
stop the recording.